Just takes a sec.
Yeah, do we see the red dot up here? Yeah.
Okay, so hi everyone, thanks for joining this webinar. My name's Paige Massey and I'm the Wellbeing Business Partner for the Trust. So today's webinar's on reset and rebalance. I'll hand over to Anjanette, obviously just go through the slides with you, and then at the end we'll do a question and answer session. Okay, thank you.
That's great. Thanks so much, Paige, and welcome everybody. Thank you for giving me the next 45 minutes or so of your time. Just a brief bit of admin. So this session is being recorded. It will be available to you afterwards. Please feel free to turn your videos off. I can't see you anyway, so you may as well sit back, relax and enjoy the content. Also, just check that you're on mute, just so we can get really good sound quality. Now, in terms of, as Paige said, please do type any questions you have in the chat box, and she'll get around to asking me those questions at the end. And brief introduction about myself. So if you've not joined me before for any of these webinars, my name is Anjanette and I'm a BANT registered nutritionist of 16 years. I'm also about 4 weeks away from finishing my MSc in nutritional medicine. So I hope to bring you the latest science in hopefully a user-friendly format that we can all understand. And yes, today's topic is all about reset and rebalance. And if I'm honest, I think I could do with a bit of the advice in this session as well. So let's have a look at what we're going to be covering today. So first of all, I want to talk us through what the physiological responses are to stress. What actually goes on inside our body when we are stressed, and therefore how can we maybe help to alter that if we can and manage it maybe a little bit better. And then I want to talk about what happens with immunity when we're under pressure, and then perhaps the role of sleep, why sleep is so very important for us if we're under pressure, if we're feeling a little bit stressed. The role of caffeine, maybe, you know, perhaps it's not necessarily as bad as you may think that I think it is, but actually moderating is a key thing. Energy for challenges, so we'll have a look at the types of foods that can help give you more energy for certain challenges. I'm going to look at specific nutrients to help support us if we're going through stressful times, and then I'm going to round it up with some meal suggestions, just because I know everybody likes a few ideas, because we're always running short on ideas to cook when we're short on time. So this first diagram that I want to show you is something I picked up from one of the papers I was reading, a master's paper. And I thought it was interesting because it talks about the Goldilocks approach. And I thought, what is Goldilocks? And if you think back to your nursery rhyme days, you know, the bed was too hard, too soft, just right, you know, so it's kind of finding a stress level that's right for you. And of course, that's going to be different for every single one of us. Some people really thrive on stress. Other people can't cope with it at all. And you may also find that no 2 days are the same either. Some days you're really resilient and other days you're not at all. So this is what this graph basically shows. You know, in terms of stress, we've got to find the bit that's right for us, because if we have too little stress, we're perhaps not very motivated at all. And if we have too much stress, we could easily be overwhelmed. So maybe just bear this in mind when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed yourself and say, what can I do to manage my day to make it a little bit more effective, that I can improve my resilience and reduce my levels of stress? So what is actually going on inside the body when we're stressed? Have you heard of something called fight or flight? So this is the response that our body gives in terms of stress. What happens? Well, our adrenal glands. Now, your adrenal glands are a small triangle that sit on top of your kidneys. And one of the things they produce is adrenaline. So when you are stressed or stimulated, these adrenal glands produce adrenaline to help fuel this fight or flight mode. But what you might notice that's also going on inside your body is that maybe digestion starts to be affected. So have you think, you know, maybe back to a time when you've been really stressed, maybe exams or something like that. How has your digestion felt? Maybe if you've had irritable bowel syndrome before, have you found that the symptoms are worse or it's exacerbated around stress and anxiety? You maybe get those little butterfly feelings. I remember I did as a kid, but, you know, 30 years ago, it was considered actually that the brain and the gut were completely separate organs, and therefore, you know, even though you're feeling stressed, these responses you're feeling in your gut were completely separate. But now we know that they are absolutely connected by something called the vagus nerve. And it's like a two-way highway that communicates thousands of times each day. So it's really normal that if you feel pressure, under pressure mentally, it's going to have some impact on your digestion as well. Now, I mentioned that adrenaline also gets released by your adrenal glands, and also something called cortisol. And that gets released at the same time from your adrenal glands. And that's fine. You know, in small amounts, we're meant to deal with cortisol as well. It's meant to be highest in the morning and lowest at the end of the day. And we need it for motivation and to get going in the day. But what we tend to find is typically people are more stressed in the medium to long term. And that means that instead of this cortisol level starting to go down as the day goes on, we get blips of it throughout the day, which can start to affect our sleep. And it may mean you get trouble getting to sleep, or you might wake in the night and your brain is overworking. And you may also find that you start to put on a bit more weight, particularly around the abdominal area, you know, the tummy area. So adrenaline and cortisol are good in moderation, you know, in acute stress, but not so much for this chronic stress that we talk about. Other things you'll experience is your heart rate, of course, and your blood pressure. They go right up when you're stressed. That's okay. But what happens if you already had high blood pressure? Maybe not ideal. And then you also find you have a reduction in our white blood cells, and that's to do with your immunity. So when we're stressed, that can suppress our immune function, which is clearly not what we want right now. So there's a bit of an overview in terms of stress. May seem like a little word, but actually the impact is huge in terms of what it affects within our body. So let's have a look at the opposite then. So we've had fight and flight. So if you're not in fight and flight mode, what mode are you in? So the other one is called rest and digest, and this is what we want you to be in, okay? So this is what happens when we're relaxed. The blood returns to the digestive organs so that you're able to absorb and break down your food more easily, rather than being to your periphery and all the muscles to allow you to run away from the threat. It returns to the core of your body a bit more. So it's great. You're absorbing more of the good food that you're eating. So therefore, you start to find a reduction in digestive problems like reflux and indigestion. And of course, you find that your mood and your sleep improves too. So there's obviously lots of different ways that you can switch from this fight and flight to rest and digest. And there's been a lot of information in terms of mindfulness being very, very effective. Even just 10 minutes a day really can make a difference. So you've got the great apps, you've got Headspace and you've got Calm. Both of those, just 10-minute exercises that you can do that just help to calm things down a little bit and kind of set up your day on a much calmer note so that you don't respond as quickly to some of these, you know, in terms of fight and flight response to some of these stresses. So you're able to manage it a little bit more. But maybe you like to be in nature. Maybe it's a walk in nature. For me, it's more cheesy 80s music, or it may be a good book. Whatever it is for you that helps you trigger this more rest and digest is surely what we ought to be focusing a bit more on. So let's have a look then. And I thought this was a really interesting study. And I think the first thing that triggered it was maybe about a year ago. It was on TV, a program. I think it was The Truth About ... So there was a series, I think it was on BBC. And this one was about immunity. And I thought, did I just hear what they said? And they said on this that a small amount of alcohol may be beneficial. And I thought, I have to find this trial because this doesn't make sense to me. So what they're saying in this one particular trial, and I've drawn a very simplistic graph here, is that actually a small amount of alcohol may be considered beneficial in terms of your immunity. And they think how that works is that alcohol is very calming. It sort of dampens any over nervousness, and we feel more relaxed after a small amount of alcohol, which means that it's sort of lowering our stress response. And as we just saw, stress can impact negatively our immunity. So the thought is that by one small glass of alcohol can reduce the stress, therefore immune function is improved. But can you have a look? It really rapidly drops off after that. So really any more than one small glass doesn't have a beneficial effect at all. So the alcohol could be considered perhaps a sedative or a depressant, but of course we've got to be very careful with that because it's not for everybody. So for many people, even though we say one glass, it may be too much for some people, it may be too much of a stimulant, and yet absolutely it can affect people's mental health. So I'm not advocating alcohol at all, but I'm just saying be aware that for some people it may not be as bad as they think, but it is in moderation. So for women it was one glass and for men it was two, but it's an individual response, and certainly not encouraging binge drinking, which in this study identified as any more than 4 drinks for women in any one sitting and 5 for men. So there's a bit of an idea of, the effect of stress, immunity and alcohol, how perhaps we could link them all. So if we're thinking about immunity, so we said that, stress can suppress our white cell production and affect our immunity. Then we know, obviously, that we want to reduce that stress impact because we want to support our immunity, particularly right now because we're through the autumn and winter months. So we've got to do and, look after our body and nourish these adrenal glands. So not overuse them, not overstress them so that they're continually producing adrenaline and cortisol. We want to nourish them because if we overuse them, then it's going to negatively impact our immune system. So in terms of nutrition, some key nutrients, yes, of course, you may be thinking vitamin C. Remember, vitamin C won't stop you getting a cold. I still have people that tell me this on the webinars, and it's not true. There's not been any studies that show that. The studies will show that vitamin C will reduce the severity and the duration of a cold, but they will not stop you getting it. Okay, so you just kind of transition through the cold a lot quicker and with not as severe symptoms. So we all need to be thinking about vitamin C, of course, through fruits and vegetables. It's not just orange. Actually, proportionately, a red pepper has more vitamin C than an orange. So we need to be having it regularly because vitamin C is water soluble, which means we don't store it. So you can't have lots on the first day of every month and it will last you throughout the month. We need to have it almost every day to keep it ticking over. Other nutrition supporting things to think about for immunity, zinc, because zinc can help to reduce the multiplication of viruses. So where do you find zinc? Well, if you look at these foods here, it seems to be an awful extensive list, doesn't it? You've got meat, so poultry, cheese, shellfish, nuts, eggs, whole grains. It seems to be everywhere, doesn't it? And yet, we are still quite deficient in it for many people. So I think the key thing is keep a varied diet as much as you can. Of course, eating as much unprocessed food as possible. It doesn't need to be fresh, remember. Frozen is just as good and it's about half the price. So maybe visit the freezer section of the supermarket before you do the fresh section, before you spend more money than you necessarily need to. And selenium can be really helpful as well to reduce selenium deficiency. So if you're deficient in it, you haven't got too much of it, that can reduce the immune response. So where do you find selenium to support your body's function a little bit? The one that I really like is Brazil nuts. So I've just put in my order for some dark chocolate coated Brazil nuts. So 2 of those a day is a really good source of selenium. Doesn't, of course, have to have chocolate on it. It's the actual Brazil nut that's high in selenium, not the chocolate. But I find for me that's my go-to snack at the end of the day. My little bit of reward is my dark chocolate Brazil nuts. But other sources we've got listed there as well. And you're probably aware of vitamin D3, that we all need to take that through, if you're in the northern hemisphere at the moment, going through autumn and winter. The sun isn't high enough in the sky, it's not powerful enough to provide sufficient UVB rays for us to make vitamin D. So all of us, men, women, children, elderly, we all need to be taking vitamin D3 from now all the way through till about March or April. So yes, you can also get it from oily fish and you can get it from eggs, particularly the egg yolk. But realistically, Even though I'm a nutritionist, I know that you're not going to get enough vitamin D just from those food sources. So we do need to take a supplement as well. And it's tiny and it's cheap and you can get it in supermarkets. So there really is no excuse for that. So let's have a think now as well about maybe this new term that you've not heard before called the microbiome. What is the microbiome? Well, actually, there's been a lot of information about it in nutrition circles for the last couple of years, as actually there is this rumour that we may even be consider labelling it a new organ in our body because it's that exceptional in terms of what it does. So what it is a collection of good bacteria in your digestive system. Now you're born with a load of good bacteria, and everything you do every day after that can also affect it. So things you touch, things you breathe, things you eat, etc. can all influence your microbiome. And your microbiome, your good bacteria, is unique to you, just like your fingerprint. So no two people have the same. Now, what we've identified recently in the last couple of years, and why we're considering thinking about naming it as an actual organ, is that it's so very important for our mental health and for our immunity, and also keeping a healthy weight. Because this gut bacteria helps to feed a lot of these processes that are involved in each of those areas. So yes, why am I mentioning it then today in terms of resilience and helping rebalance and reset? Well, stress can negatively impact it, can reduce the variety of a microbiome in a digestive system. And we want variety. We want lots of different good bacteria in there. But so does antibiotics. So of course, if you're prescribed antibiotics, you must take them. But once you finish taking them, you should also take a course of probiotics that you can buy from a health food store to put the good bacteria back in again. But also we find alcohol, and maybe over the festive season, people may be drinking a bit more alcohol. That starts to reduce the quality of your microbiome, as does smoking. So we need to think about eating a varied diet as much as possible to help support this microbiome. Now, in terms of immunity, 70% of your immunity is located in your intestines, in this microbiome. So it's really helping to support good immunity. So what can you do every day to help support your microbiome? Well, first thing, and I mentioned about probiotics there in terms of after antibiotics, buy some from a health food store. But if you haven't had antibiotics, do you still need probiotics? Yes, but in a different way, a much milder dose, you know, a sort of more like a maintenance kind of thing. And look at this lovely list here of the sources that we have. So probiotics are found in things like natural yogurt. If you go to your supermarket, it will say live cultures on it, and then that you'll know that's got good bacteria in it. You've also got kefir in the supermarkets now. Kefir is a bit like a soured flavoured yogurt, so it can be a bit too sour sometimes, so it's quite nice to mix it with yogurt, mix the two of them together to dilute it a little bit. Obviously, you can buy sauerkraut as well, which is a type of fermented shredded cabbage. Tempeh is a fermented soybean. Kimchi, I've got that in my fridge at the moment, which is a fermented cabbage. I add that to stir fries. Miso, you can buy that as a paste and make some soup with it. And kombucha, you can buy that as a tea to drink. So each one of these are really good sources of good bacteria. So you don't need to have all of them all the time, but if you can include certainly some of them every week in your diet, that would be great. But you need to feed them. Okay, to keep them there, you need to feed them. And the stuff that you feed them is what we call prebiotics. So prebiotics, look at this lovely list again. These are probably foods that I hope most of us would eat ordinarily anyway. So fibre is basically something that feeds these probiotics to keep them in there and help them to do the good work that they're doing in supporting our immune system and our mental health. But a word of caution, don't go overboard after today's webinar and go, right, onions was on that list. I'm putting 3 onions in my dinner tonight, because each of those things there can make your digestive system a little bit windy and a bit uncomfortable. So yes, be careful, add them in, but add it slowly, okay, not too quickly, or you will probably pay the price. So now let's have a look when we're thinking about reset and rebalance. We think about what we need to do, what we can do to help support our resilience. And one area is certainly our sleep. And if you're anything like me, if someone tells me to do something, I'm very unlikely to do it unless they actually explain why I should do it. And then I kind of buy into it a bit more and I go, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So when I talk about sleep to people, I think it's really important to talk about the sleep cycle. So maybe you can understand what's going on, because isn't it annoying how it seems like 1 minute you shut your eyes and a minute later they're open and your day starts. You know, you may have had 6, 7, whatever hours sleep, but you're totally oblivious as to what's gone on. So this is what's going on. So when you first go to sleep, you go into what we call stage 1, which is really light sleep, easy to wake you. Nope, you were never asleep, honest. After 5-10 minutes, you go into stage 2, a little bit more tricky to wake you at that stage. From there, you go in stages 3 and 4 for some reason. They group them together. This is a really crucial stage for children, and this is our deepest level of sleep. This is when human growth hormone starts to get released. This is when kids, teenagers, start to grow. You know those teenagers that seem to spend hours in bed? Yeah, they spend hours in bed for a reason, because they're growing. But it's also important for us as adults. It's when we repair any, tissue damage that we may have done throughout the day if we've been exercising, for example. So our blood pressure also drops and our muscles are nice and relaxed. Briefly, we go into 2 and back out again. And then we go into a really crucial stage as well for us adults. It's called REM, rapid eye movement. And this is about 1 to 2 hours after we've fallen asleep. And this is all about memory function. It's like pressing that save button on your computer and your brain's going, do I want to remember that from today? Yep, I do. Right, press save. So funnily enough, the body's also paralyzed at this stage because you don't want to act out your dreams, because there's a lot of dreaming going on at that stage. And then you go back to stage 1 and you go round again. So each cycle is meant to be about, on average, about 90 minutes. Now, the whole cycle is important, because throughout the cycle, your brain's going, yeah, don't need to keep that, don't want that. And it, sorts all through stuff. And then in REM, it goes save, save, save. So it's really important that if we want to be resilient, that we prioritize our sleep for our mental health, for our memory function. And we all know what it's like if we haven't had a good night's sleep. Our fuse is a little bit shorter that next day, isn't it? We're not quite as resilient as we once were. So yeah, we need to prioritize our sleep. We need to make sure that we go consistently to bed at the same time and we wake at the same time, even if you can, weekend or whatever. And that's why it can be really tricky if you're working shift, because you'll notice if you're working shift, it can also start to affect your health in not such a positive way. So where we can, when, make sure you prioritize your sleep. It doesn't matter what hours you're working, what shift you're working. We need to get a good quality sleep to try and help boost our resilience. So now let's have a look at stimulants. Okay, stimulants are okay, in moderation, when you need them. Save them for when you need them. Stop overstimulating yourself, because you will get really worn out very quickly. So I mentioned earlier on about cortisol. Should be highest in the morning, lowest at the end of the day. And whenever we're overstimulated, the cortisol also gets released. So there's this school of thought, and this one study that I looked at, they said actually maybe we just need to be selective about when we have maybe caffeine in the day, because of course caffeine is a stimulant. And maybe we can cut back a little bit. And actually, do we really need caffeine first thing in the morning? Because if naturally our cortisol levels are already high and we have a decent breakfast, we shouldn't really need it as well. And if you're thinking, oh yeah, I definitely need my caffeine in the morning, ask yourself why. Was it a bad quality night's sleep? Was it not enough hours? Or what made it a bad night's sleep? And then fix that problem. So instead of fixing the symptoms, you've got to fix the cause. And then you won't need to do what we call the band-aid approach, where you just put a plaster over everything. Just having caffeine all the time just is the plaster in effect. Fix the cause first. So for many people, you might find that actually your first caffeine of the day maybe is around about mid-morning when your breakfast started to wear off, and then maybe again mid-afternoon when your lunch has started to wear off. So maybe it's a chance to experiment for you, but of course, if you're going to start to cut down on your caffeine, be aware you'll probably start to feel a little bit stressed, cross, snapping at people. You might have a headache. That really only lasts about 4 or 5 days, and then you're out the other side and it's fine. So the estimated, what we call half-life, that means how long it's in the body, the half-life of caffeine is 5 to 7 hours. But of course, We're all individual. Some people can clear it quicker than other. And also decaf doesn't mean zero caffeine. It just means less. And some may have up to 30% caffeine. So maybe have a little check and see that you might be thinking, oh yeah, I'm fine to have my decaf coffee or decaf tea before bed. But really, how much caffeine's in there? Is it maybe still a little bit too much? So now I want to talk about energy for challenges. What can I suggest for you if you know you've got a busy time coming up and it could well be quite stressful and you want to make sure that you're, prepared as much as possible. But a lot of it is going to be in relation to how your blood sugar is. So that means the amount of sugar in your blood. Okay, so obviously when you eat or drink anything, the sugar gets released into your bloodstream. And efficiently, our pancreas should secrete insulin, which grabs hold of the sugar and moves it into muscles, etc., for storage for later on, for use for when we're doing our fight and flight mode. So what we find, though, for a lot of people is that this glucose uptake is not as efficient as it maybe once was. Maybe people are becoming more pre-diabetic. And certainly if you're diabetic, you'll struggle with it as well. The insulin isn't responding the same, and the blood glucose the glucose is in your blood for too long. And therefore you probably feel tired because the glucose hasn't been moved into your muscles for storage. It's sitting in your blood and it really shouldn't be in there. So what we tend to find is people can have real dips in blood glucose level and they start to feel, concentration's not great, poor memory, looking for stimulants. They're looking for something to boost their energy. So that's when they reach for cakes, biscuits, coffee, etc. But if you know that's you, then maybe think, right, so what did I last eat? Was it maybe the most sensible meal? Was it one that didn't have really very much protein or fiber or fat in it? Was it just some kind of, piece of fruit or something sweet? And then that figures exactly why you're feeling that way with this big roller coaster of energy and concentration. We want it to be a bit more stable. So thinking about things like reducing the stimulants, so the sugar, the caffeine, alcohol, simple carbohydrates means things like white bread, white pasta, white rice. So, those simple carbohydrates are not so bad if you include them in the same meal as a good source of protein or some fat or some fiber, because those things help to slow down the speed of the glucose release from the simple carbohydrates. And the example I always use is with my kids when they come back from school, 3:30 in the afternoon, straight into the biscuit cupboard, and I totally get it because they've probably crashed after a busy day at school. But I'll always give them a glass of milk at the same time because milk is a really good source of fat and of protein, and it can stabilize any of the sweet treats that they're having. Or maybe, a yogurt or some hummus or something like that, or some nuts. Those are really good examples of quick, easy fixes that you can get to stabilize your glucose levels a little bit more. And maybe if you're thinking about a substitute for caffeine because you still obviously want to go through the ritual of making a hot drink, then rooibos or Red Bush is a really good alternative. Naturally caffeine-free. It's not decaf. It doesn't have any in it. Lots of different herb teas, obviously fruit teas, different types of fruit you can add to hot water. So there's lots of choice. It doesn't need to be caffeine. And I would say as well, maybe experiment with your meals. A lot of people at the moment are doing intermittent fasting in terms of weight management. They find that if they go through periods of time where they don't consume anything other than water, that their weight is a lot more achievable, a better balance in their weight. So some people eat breakfast and some don't. And I put here eat breakfast, but really that's a general rule. It doesn't have to be, it's not for everybody because everybody's different, okay? You may find that you just don't need breakfast in the morning, but if you do skip breakfast, make sure that the first time you do eat, how you break your fast, your overnight fast, it's got to be something sensible. No sort of like coffee and pastries or anything like that. Some decent kind of food in there that might have something like oats or nuts or seeds in there would be a really good choice. And if you're thinking maybe mid-afternoon, as a lot of people do, they crash about 3 or 4 o'clock, then choosing certainly a piece of fruit's fine. But if you can choose something called a low glycemic index, the glycemic index is a scientific calculation of how quickly carbohydrate foods release their glucose into the blood, and they've got a really great website. It's called glycemicindex.com, and in there it's got a search box. You put in the carbohydrate that you like to eat, hit search, and it will give you its number out of 0 to 100. And the nearer to 100 it is, it means it releases sugar really quickly. 0 means really slowly. So if you want a quick hit of energy, maybe in half an hour's time, you're going to go for a run, then you want a higher glycemic index food that releases energy quickly to fuel your exercise, like a banana or something. But if you're going to be sitting on your bottom and not thinking about doing any exercise, then you want to choose a low glycemic index fruit like pears, apples, basically something with a good source of fibre in it. But a key thing to think about is protein. Are you eating enough protein with every meal? So if you're not eating enough protein, then I can guarantee within about an hour or so, you're going to start craving a lot of these sweeter foods. So protein is amazing at keeping you fuller for longer. So certainly when I cook dinner every night or lunch, whatever, I'll always look for the protein source first. And once I've decided what that is, then I'll base the rest of the meal around it. And of course, don't forget about hydration as well. Our memory function isn't as great and we don't feel quite so energetic if we are a little bit hydrated. So don't wait until you're thirsty. A key thing to do is look at the colour of your urine. So that's a real-time example of hydration. So if you are hydrated, your urine should be a sort of pale yellow champagne colour. But if it's darker than that, then you're potentially dehydrated, so you need to grab a drink. Now, obviously, that's going to be different first thing in the morning because your urine is darker first thing in the morning, but throughout the rest of the day, aim for that pale yellow colour. And it doesn't need to be clear either. If it's clear urine, you're potentially drinking too much water and overworking your kidneys. So aim for that sort of pale yellow as your own gauge as to your hydration level. So then in terms of some nutrition specifics to support resilience, there are loads that are involved. And we could talk about this all day. So I thought, right, I'll just pick three main ones that are important for resilience. If you know that you're going to go through a stressful period of time, which vitamins or minerals really seem to get utilised perhaps more quickly than others. So we therefore, need to support them in our diet as much as possible. So vitamin C is the first one. We really do burn through that one a lot when we're stressed. So where can we find vitamin C? Remember I said about red peppers, broccoli, strawberries, all of those are proportionately better sources than even the orange. So don't think it's just fruit, it can be veg as well. And vitamin C, yes, very important for frequent infections, as I already mentioned. So make sure you have a regular amount of vitamin C. Now, the second one is a B vitamin complex. And I put the word complex there, which means all of the B vitamins together, because there's lots of different B vitamins. But they all do something slightly different. So actually what we find is that when we have them all together, they work far more effectively. So where do you find B vitamins? Well, you find them actually in most animal products and in whole grains, lentils and beans. Now you'll be thinking, that's great, that's pretty much most of my diet. But for many of us, and I'm included in this, even though my diet's pretty good, there are times actually when I take a multivitamin and mineral because my diet just isn't enough. I'm utilising these B vitamins far more than I can get through food. And it's brilliant that literally within a couple of days, you start to find your energy level really starting to pick up. So they're really quick at acting. So if you find that your mood is a little bit not great and your energy is a bit low, then maybe it's thinking about the B vitamins in your diet, and maybe you may even want to supplement it with a multivitamin and mineral. So they're really, really effective. Slight side effect of them, if you consider it a side effect, is that your urine will be bright yellow. But that's fine. That's just one of the byproducts of the B vitamins. It doesn't do you any harm. It's just something you may notice. And then the third one there we've got is magnesium. And why magnesium? Because it gets utilised an awful lot when we're stressed. We burn through it a lot. And it's also known as the relaxing mineral, which a lot of us need. We need a lot more of that. When I'm doing these webinars, people will tell me, yep, I take magnesium because I need it to help me get to sleep at night. It helps calm my mind a little bit. And certainly you can find it in nuts and seeds, spinach and oats are all really good examples. In all honesty, the best source, I would say, is Epsom salts. So Epsom salts, you've probably heard your grandparents talking about. You can buy them online, of course, chemists, health food stores, supermarkets, everywhere now. And you add them to water and you soak your body in them. So it doesn't need to be a bath. It could just be your hands or it could be your feet. But the brilliant way to do that is that it's a gentle absorption. You only absorb as much as you need. If you orally take a magnesium supplement, how do you know how much you need? You could be taking too much. So Epsom salts are really great for if you've got aching muscles, if you get muscle cramps, and if your mind is just really active and you can't stop the chatter. Maybe have a soak in some Epsom salts and you'll just start to notice it all just becoming a little bit calmer. Now, I did promise you, didn't I, some practical suggestions in terms of what I call a nutritionist dream, some meal suggestions. So here I've broken them down into various different times of the day. So in terms of breakfast, there is no more I didn't have time excuse. Okay, how long does it actually take you to eat a yogurt? You know, if you can, make it a natural yogurt as well, not one with fruit in it. The manufacturer are not daft. They know that if they're going to put fruit in there, it's a cheeky excuse to also add a load of sugar in there. And they know that if your mouth tastes sweet, your body instinctively wants more of it. So you're going to buy the product again. So please just go, if you can, the natural one and add your own fruit into it. And then you know there's no added sugar. And what about maybe like a muesli bar or a breakfast bar? Just check, you know, one that's not got too much sugar in it, because there's an awful lot out there that do. If you've got a bit more time in the morning, what about a muesli, like a low sugar muesli? Or you also get the Kellogg's do a no added sugar granola. And I sometimes have that for my breakfast. And it's great because it does have sweetness in it, but it's natural sweetness from like dates or coconut or banana puree, rather than the white stuff that you add to cakes and biscuits and maybe in a cup of tea. So have some cereal in the morning, maybe with some fruit and some yogurt or some milk. And if you're a toast fiend, don't add jam or marmalade. That's just sugar on toast, which is a carbohydrate, which is sugar. So you've got sugar on sugar. So yeah, toast with jam or toast with marmalade won't fill you for very long at all. What you want is something like a nut butter. It doesn't have to be peanut, it could be almond or cashew, but try a little experiment, see how far you get. I know that if you had a nut butter on toast, it will last you a lot longer in your stomach than jam or marmalade. And then if you've got a bit more time, maybe over the weekend, I'm a big fan of eggs. You know, a couple of eggs, fantastic on some granary or seeded toast. And of course, things like porridge is great as well. But if you're buying an instant porridge, just check the amount of sugar. Again, they do tend to sneak it in a little bit. Now, what about snacks? Maybe mid-afternoon, maybe late morning, depends on what shifts you're working. What are considered good snacks? Well, again, the muesli bar is quick to eat, but just check the quality of that one. A handful of nuts and seeds, maybe in your bag. Can you have mixed nuts and seeds? Maybe with a tiny bit of dried fruit in there as well. And of course, you can have a piece of fruit. All of those are quick to eat and a good source of energy. If you've got a bit more time, then yeah, you can have a yogurt, maybe put some fruit in it as well. And you can maybe take in, packets of oat cakes with maybe some hummus or some sort of dip, maybe some raw carrot or pepper or celery, something you can dip in the hummus. And again, hummus is a really, really good source of protein, and you're getting some really good raw veg in there as well. And if you've got lots of time, maybe you could have a cereal. Cereals don't have to just be for breakfast. You could also have them as a snack with some yogurt or some fruit. And then in terms of lunch, of course, if you've got no time, you can always buy something. I always suggest to people, don't buy sliced bread sandwiches. We tend to find that the sliced bread can make people feel a little bit bloated in the afternoon. So if you can, maybe try a wrap or a pita bread instead. And then we don't seem to have the same uncomfortable tummy. But just make sure there's a good source of protein in there. Otherwise, you will start to feel hungry. And of course, bring in those leftovers. You made it, you know what's in it, and you're saving yourself a lot of money. In terms of a bit more time, you can make a soup. Just make sure it's a really hearty soup with some like lentils in there or some beans in there or barley, something like that, with some oatcakes or some granary or seeded bread. But maybe if you're not a soup fan, maybe something like a salad with a good source of protein, a couple of eggs, some feta cheese, a piece of salmon, some chicken. Just make sure you vary it, but the protein is the key thing because it's got to fill you for a long time. And if you've got a bit more time for lunch, then of course you can make any of these things at home yourself. In terms of dinner, I know lots of people who are like, oh, I've worked a long day and then I go to the gym and then it's bedtime. So I don't really eat dinner. But maybe you probably do. I think after exercise, it's probably a good idea to have some food to put back into your muscles, some of the protein that you've stripped. So things like eggs on toast is great, literally just a couple of minutes. Sardines on toast, trust me, really nice. If you like tuna, you'll like sardines. You just literally open the can, drain out the oil and mash it like you would tuna. It looks exactly like tuna, and they've been filleted and they've had the head removed, so it's identical, but it has a lot more omega-3 than tuna does, so there is benefit in those sardines. And literally, in the time it takes to mash it, your toaster's in the toaster. So within 2 minutes, that's it, meal done. If you've got a bit more time, you could make an omelette with perhaps 2 or 3 eggs, adding some frozen veg from the freezer, much cheaper, less waste. And you can just quickly create a stir fry with that and then add the eggs in. Or indeed a couple of minutes with jacket potato in the microwave and adding again a good source of protein. If you've got lots of time, well, you can even make a roast dinner or do a more complicated stir fry. So there's always options. So there's no excuse for you don't have any more time. And then to round it up, I recently wrote this last slide and I was laughing because when I wrote it, I was thinking, I could do with some of this advice. I even thought it today because this is my 3rd webinar that I'm delivering today. And earlier on, I was feeling the pressure, feeling the stress. And I thought, and Jeanette, what did you put in that webinar that you wrote recently? You need to action this. So maybe we all do need a reminder of what some rest and reset tips are. So thinking about things like rest, here's a question for you. When was the last time you were actually still? I mean still, like sat down, without your phone, nobody talking to you, just you. And obviously not when you're asleep, but totally relaxed. Probably wasn't today, was it? So maybe we need to start thinking about that. Maybe we need to find a chair or somewhere with a view near a window that you like to look out of. And maybe every day you can just allow yourself the opportunity just to sit, just to look out the window and really look. What's going on outside? What can you see that's changing? Just allow your brain the chance to detach a little bit. So doing that at least once a day. It doesn't need to be, in the house. It could be in the car. I actually went and did the school run this afternoon. I ended up being a little bit early, so I practiced it there. It's very tempting to pick up my phone, but I thought, no, leave it there and actually just sit in the car with no radio on and just sit for 10 minutes. Maybe it's a bath that you could do, and that could really help you relax and rewind at the end of the day with no distractions. How about the reminder to breathe more deeply? And for me, it really works, particularly if I'm struggling with my sleep and I wake in the night and I can't go back to sleep because my brain is overacting. I inhale through my nose for 4 and I exhale for 6 through my mouth. And it's quite tricky. I think it's easy to breathe in 4, but I only get to about 5 when I exhale. But after I've done a couple of times, I get to 6 as my body starts to really relax. I can really get to 6 and really help calm it. And of course, disconnecting from social media, because you may think, I'll just have a break from my work, and you pick up your phone to have a look on social media. You're not really having a break. It's just a distraction. But if we can detach and completely put it away, we'll find ourselves a lot calmer. And ideally, no company as well. Just yourself, in peace. And then in terms of reset, what are some ideas to help you reset? Maybe think about do things in a slightly different way. So maybe think about whether actually the order of things you do in the day may not be the best order. Maybe you might want to have a bigger meal in the middle of the day and therefore spend a bit more time preparing in the middle of the day rather than at the end of the day and getting really stressed about it and being really hungry and thinking that you haven't made a great dinner. And also remember, be brave and say no to people. People will always ask for more of your time than you can give them. So be brave sometimes and say, no, unfortunately, I can't commit to that. I need some time for me. Maybe think about removing things or people or places that no longer serve you. They may have been good for you in the past, but they are too much of a stress for you now. walk away from them if you can, if it's safe to do so. But obviously think about it first. Don't make any rash decisions. But sometimes situations, places are not always the positive that they once were, and that can be quite draining as well. You might like to consider journaling, and I know this is very popular. A lot of people that I follow on social media and podcasts that I listen to, they do a lot of journaling. At the start of the day, they might write some affirmations as well, and at the end of the day, you know, what they've got to be thankful for. So there's a lot to be said about, you know, reflecting and thinking positively. Obviously, preparing some healthy meals if you can. Things like on a Sunday, why not buy a whole roast chicken? And that will do you maybe for 3 meals. You don't really need to recook, you just reheat it again. And the cost saving as well. And I think importantly as well, remember, no matter how maybe stressful your day has been, each day is a new day. It's a new line to draw, and we start again. So there's always hope, there's always positivity, and there's always experiences that we can learn. Each day is a new day. So further information, I find here, these are really good websites for me, because we're all been in the position where we're struggling to cook something that's interesting and healthy, but we don't have time or inspiration. So I find the BBC's really good resource. You can just put in like 2 things you've got in your fridge, a leek and some creme fraiche or something like that. And it will give you some recipes that are really simple to follow. So I would say go and have a look at some of those for inspiration, and that will help motivate you perhaps to eat a little bit better. And then I always end my webinars with the reminder in terms of the content that I've talked about today. Of course, I don't know any of you individually, so I can't suggest any particular supplements. And of course, if you're thinking about taking any supplements and you are on medication, you should check with your doctor first. So I hope you enjoyed the content of today's webinar. There's quite a bit to think about in there, wasn't there? So obviously this session is being recorded, so if you feel that you've got some colleagues that may appreciate the content, please feel free to share it with them. And also I encourage you, if you haven't already, to type any questions in the chat box. And so over to you. If you're able to ask me any questions, Paige, that would be fantastic.
Just waiting now. Sorry, one second. I can see somebody's typing, so just bear with me a second.
Of course, no problem. We've still got 10 minutes, okay? So please don't feel rushed. That's absolutely fine. Lots of opportunity to type questions, and also don't feel, you know, that needs to be about this topic. If you've got any general nutrition questions, also feel free to ask those as well.
So Louise has just typed that she's enjoyed the session, and actually the session itself has allowed her to sit still and have the opportunity to listen. And I think sometimes it is just about that as well, taking that space, isn't it? As you mentioned.
It's great, isn't it? I love it how with these webinars, I think people really appreciate, I say, turn your videos off, because I know what it's like. You know, too many Zoom and Teams calls. Sometimes you just want to switch off and just sit back and just let the information sort of wash over you, kind of thing. So thank you. That obviously has had the desired effect, and thank you for saying that. That's really, really great that it's allowed you some time just to reflect.
And then we've just got somebody else typing, so if you just don't mind bearing with us for that as well.
Of course, yeah, that's no problem. And of course, Paige, if you've got any questions that, you know, if you want to say and you think of any nutrition questions, feel free to ask them as well as the audience today. That's fine.
Yeah, so we've got another comment. Enjoyed this and picked up some great tips for managing stress and anxiety and gastro-related problems. So yeah, that's obviously another positive comment. I think from my perspective, yeah, it's the bits around just taking that time and space when you need it is really important when you've got a busy job. because sometimes you can just keep going, and you're probably not as productive doing it that way. So it is about having that space to just think about, the present moment, I guess. So that's kind of really important, and I'll definitely be trying to do that a bit more.
Yeah, and for me, I find kind of when I do the school run in the morning, just 10 minutes to myself, just a bit of a walk down the end of the road and back. I get into nature and it's daylight and it makes me feel a bit more energetic and helps to clear my head. The amount of people who still say, the highlight of the day is when they're walking their dog. It's great because they're detached from work and it's just them in nature. So just absolutely get out there and even if it's a little bit of a rainy, drizzly day, put on a jacket, get out there. It doesn't need to be a run or anything like that because I hate running. It's just a walk. I just need to be outside into nature, and that really helps to reset myself and remind myself actually what is important. And these perhaps unnecessary thoughts of, what have I got to do, and all the juggling of being, someone who works and a parent and someone studying my master's. We've all got things that we juggle in our heads. Sometimes we just need to reset it. And nature is fantastic at helping us reset.
Yeah. Another thing I just wanted to say, I can see somebody else is typing, but obviously you did allude to mindfulness in this session, and tomorrow we've actually got a mindfulness practice session from 1 till 1:15. So it's only a 15-minute quick mindfulness session. And I did it last week and it was really useful. So if anybody wants to join that tomorrow, if you've got that 15-minute space, just email me and I'll send you the link. And my email's page.massey@nhs.net. Jane's just put, maybe we could think about setting up a regular walking group, which definitely is on my agenda, Jane, to do that, because I think it is important to, as Anjanette says, get outside really. I know there is currently one at the trust, but I think the timing is sometimes a bit of an issue. So if we can look at setting something up that suits people a little bit better, we can definitely move forward with that. So yeah. Unless there's any more questions, I'll just, go on, sorry,
the
go
other
ahead.
thing I was just thinking about that a lot of people have been speaking about in the last few months, and I tried it myself and I couldn't believe how effective it is. I know the benefits of things like yoga. I see it all the time and read the papers, but it's just never really been on my radar until a few months ago. And I thought I could really do with some help with my getting some good quality sleep. And a lot of people had mentioned there's a YouTube channel, and it's with a lady called Adrienne. And she's a bit like Joe Wicks, but whereas Joe Wicks is high intensity interval training, she's yoga. And she's got so many different programs on there, and it's free, and it's on YouTube, and it's like 15-minute exercises. You don't need any equipment or anything like that. And I thought, well, all right, I'll give it a go. And the night I did, there was like a bedtime one. I fell asleep at 8:30 that night, which is so unlike me, but it was unbelievable. Just 15 minutes just totally chilled me right down. My brain speed just slowed, and I just felt so calm. It was just amazing. So something like that people may also want to maybe have a look at. So yes, it's Adrienne is the yoga YouTube channel.
Okay. Thank
She's
you for
very
that.
good.
No, I appreciate that. And then again, just for those that are on the call, I will be looking at some of the on-site trust level things we can do as well around some of these kind of activities. So just watch out for some internal comms around different topics that we can try and explore a bit more. And as I say, email me if you've got any questions or any ideas or thoughts. So I think on that note, Anjanette, if you're happy and you want to conclude, we'll stop recording. And
yeah, that's great. Thank you, Paige, and thank you to everybody who's joined as well. I think we've got a lovely small group, so really appreciate your feedback. That's really great to hear that you enjoyed it, and look forward to bringing some more content for you all. So I hope you have a lovely rest of your afternoon, a nice calm evening, and yeah, hopefully look forward to seeing you all soon. And thank you, Paige, for your support today as well. That's great.
no problem at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.